today we're going over what's going on with wolves, bats, and elk in different parts of the world.
Wait,
We're-
we're doing bats?
Or flying foxes, as they're also called.
You sent me penguins.
Yeah, I mixed it up with something else that's occurring. Switching the bats over to penguins. We're streaming on both Rumble, YouTube, and Kick. So, from SmithsonianMag.com, nearly half of Italy's wolves are part dog now, thanks to hybridization. Is that a threat to the species? Yes. Oh, no. That is not great. Like, I literally thought of Italy's somewhere between 2,200 to 2,600 wolves that they were doing quite well, and they had a lot of genetic variety, and very few were hybrids. This is like what's going on with many of the dingoes over in Australia. That is not good. So let's see what else is going on. So, between 15,000 and 30,000 years ago, a now extinct population of wolves evolved into dogs with a little help from humans today, at least in Italy, which hosts one of Europe's largest wolf populations. Genes are flowing in the opposite direction. Recent genetic testing suggests that, particularly in the country's central and southern regions, nearly half of the wild wolves are actually wolf dog hybrids. Um, okay, so that's still not great considering it's in the central and southern regions. I mean, it wouldn't matter even if it was over in the different parts of northern Italy. That represents a massive shift from the 1970s when Luigi Boitani, now the chair of the International Union for Conservation of Nature's Large Carnivore Initiative for Europe, discovered the country's first known wolf dog hybrid. Um, were they non existent? That's interesting. The 1970s were a period of transition for Italy's wolves. At the time, the population was coming out of a tailspin. New laws and conservation efforts were designed to encourage wolves to recolonize habitat from which they'd been extirpated. But the landscape and its inhabitants had changed. Wild countryside had given way to rampant urbanization, and Italy's central and southern regions, where wolves began recovering first, hosted high numbers of free ranging dogs. Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that. So, like, Brazil, is that where Brazil got the um that like simply all those free roaming dogs in different regions? Did that derive from Italy? So it didn't take long for the wolves to begin rubbing shoulders and more with the local canines. Decades later, Rita Lorenzini, a biologist and director of Italy's experimental zoo Prophylatic Institute of Lazio and Tuscany, worked with her team to analyze hundreds of DNA samples collected from a region spanning from Bologna down to the toe of Italy's boot. Their analysis, published in January in the journal Biological Conservation, reveals just how close the two canine species have become. Technically, the dog is a subspecies of gray wolf, but it is still very far down genetically. Lauren Sinai's research looked at genetic material collected from 748 wolves that had been found dead between 2020 and 2024. Sheesh, that's a lot of wolves, but this could simply be due to conflict, but maybe there was disease. Conflict with other wolves, but possibly in this case, dogs. And 26 more that had been collected between 1993 and 2003. The team found that 47% were wolf dog hybrids. And while some of these animals are the descendants of hybridization events that took place generations ago, others are more recent crosses showing that hybridization is still occurring. So that was actually quite surprising that half of the first of all 748 wolves that technically all these wolves that they found this out from were dead. I was expecting them to simply be all tranquilized wolves. So that's shocking. I really wonder if maybe like simply also maybe there was something wrong with these wolf dog hybrids. Was it simply due to maybe their dog ancestor that they had some sort of a disease or there was something that they didn't get vaccinated for, and so they succumbed to it. So hybrids are not easy to spot. While some people suggest wolf dog hybrids have distinctive physical features, such as darker fur than non hybrid wolves. Paulo uh, Kyushi, mm, a biologist at Sapienza University of Rome who worked with Lauren Sinai on the recent study, says scientific evidence of these visual differences is lacking and that genetic analysis remains the most reliable way to identify a hybrid. Um, well, sometimes that is the case. Well, you could say it's always best to go with a further DNA or genetic analysis, but there are many instances where you can identify distinctive traits that separate the animal from other members of a certain population, indicating that it's not a true, for instance, in this case, a pure Italian wolf.
That isn't
And
a wolf.
this does not look like a wolf. I'm shocked that that's a wolf dog. I mean, you could say looking at the extended muzzle, the ears, there's something about its just cranial structure. It's definitely doesn't have an exact domestic dog sort of a physique. There's also something about its overall core. It's a bit longer, more streamlined.
That's what I was gonna say.
Now, the tail is interesting.
That's a tail.
It has that short, curved, sort of dog and wolf somewhat appearance, but it's the extra fur. Also, now that they've told us, or now that we know we're dealing with, wolf dog hybrids, then it makes sense that there's a bit more of a distinct fluff on the end. However, there are several different breeds of dogs like Akitas, Huskies, Malamutes that have very fluffy tails. But it's just a bit smaller on here. You could even say what, Russell Terriers? Unless I'm confusing them with several other breeds. Maybe, oh yeah, those Irish Wolfhounds. Those guys. They might have come from originally Denmark. But the extremely high presence of wolf dog hybrids in central and southern Italy, Shushai says, represents I think it's supposed to be the Chiuchi, like fettuccine. I don't know. Represents a threat to the future of the country's wolves. Yeah, no kidding. I really don't. I mean, um, we were willing to spend a lot of time with these guys, but most people won't. Um, I mean, I'd somewhat be okay if, people wanted them as their pets. But like I said, you'd have to spend such considerable amount of time with wolf dogs. Um, yeah, you might have to just take them out at this point. It's unlikely that a wolf living in a healthy, stable pack in the wild would reproduce with a free ranging dog. Um, Chuchi explains. Um, no, I mean, it's occurred with different populations of wolves around the world. So I'd have to disagree with that. These wolves are more likely to see a dog as competition or even as prey. Now, maybe it differs with different subpopulations of gray wolves, but still occurs. But when the pack structure falls apart and female wolves find themselves alone in an area filled with free ranging dogs, the dynamic can change. I think I've still heard of it, of where or read that there are male wolves that have mated with female dogs. So while Italy hosts nearly 3,300, whoa, wow, I didn't realize that the population had increased to that much. Well, now we know that technically it's not because of the hybrids. So it could be around the 2,600 number with pure wolves. That's my guess. Over in Italy, of Europe's roughly 21,500 wolves. Yeah, and they're still increasing, which is good to see. There needs to be more wolves in Europe. The fact that so many are actually dog hybrids possess or poses a silent danger. Italy's wolves might be close to a point of no return that experts call genetic swamping, in which the wolves' original gene pool is irreversibly replaced by that of the hybrids. In simple words, it means the wolf, genetically speaking, could disappear. Why are most of the wolves in Italy like, well, the people aging? Um,
Okay, I'm gonna spit my coffee on my computer.
Or, yeah, that's hmm. I mean, that is something that I haven't looked into. I mean, it's just odd. You have it where it's a massively increasing population, and at least the article's making it out like, or maybe it's Chuchi, whoever the scientist is, or was it the head of that? Yeah, Paulo. So this biologist possibly claiming that basically it's making out like they're all older wolves and not capable of reproducing. In northern Italy, where there are fewer free ranging dogs, wolf dog hybrids are much rarer than in the central and southern regions of the country. But that, Lorenzini says, is likely temporary. Wolves can cross vast distances, and hybrids could eventually mix and mingle with wolves in northern Italy or even across Europe. Yeah, just just take the wolf dog hybrids out. Of course, wolves and domesticated dogs have been breeding and thus hybridizing since they first diverged thousands of years ago. Um, yeah, but I think when there was a great extent of it, it tended to be by, humans wanting more dogs. But in this case, it just seems to be one of those instances where possibly there's a lot of just mixing in the wilderness. In North America, for example, gray wolves with black coloring are believed to be the distant descendants of wolf dog mixes. Yeah, there's something else that goes with that. Research suggests these canines even picked up some perks from their interspecies mingling. Black wolves are, in fact, more resistant than their peers to some diseases, such as canine distemper, and they may also be more successful at hunting in forests. Okay, the second one I haven't heard of. I think it varies depending on the black wolf, and black wolves are really only restricted to North America. They are extremely rare. I mean, they are scarce over in different parts of Asia and Europe. It's just that specific genetic that they have does not exist in those other populations. Um, which is fine, but I don't really think their coloring makes them any more successful at hunting. Also depends on their prey species eyesight as well. Oh, is there anything else? But what's happening in Italy is totally different, Lauren Sinai says, because of the scale and the speed at which it is taking place. Makes me wonder about what's going on with certain deer populations over there, and as well as boars. Is also that having a big impact? But like, really, it's how what is the age? What is the average age of wolves over in Italy that we're looking at? Astrid Vic Stronen, a geneticist at the University of Ljubljana in Slovenia, who wasn't involved in the research, agrees the possible downsides of hybridization outweigh the potential benefits. Overall, she says, I think the main concern is that it would be a risk. It is a risk. It's already occurring. Italy's abundance of wolf dog hybrids, Chuchi, adds, threatens to disrupt the key role wolves play in the ecosystem, though researchers know little about the ways hybridization affects how wolves function, as it's difficult to study the animals in the wild. Chuchi says it's possible that hybridization is driving changes to their physiology and behavior. Well, obviously, I mean, when you have something that looks kind of as dull as the wolf dog hybrid in the other picture, I would assume that it's going to have drastic effects on its overall yeah, appearance, the way that it feeds, hunts, behaves with other wolves, but also the different genetic changes if it were to have pups of its own, like how they would look, such as how they hunt, how they find and defend their territory, and how they interact socially. To Chuchi, the rampant hybridization is also putting the uniqueness of the species at risk. The authenticity of the wolf species is going missing with all its cultural, ecological, and evolutionary value. Um, well, what is interesting, because I mean, it is not good that this is occurring, but it's not as bad as you would think, considering there are millions of dogs over in Italy, and there's only around what, at least this point, 2,600 to 3,000 wolves. And, well, the fact that there's still just slightly less pure wolves over in Italy, despite that many dogs, is still good to see. So this is something Boitanai has been worried about and has been persistently warning about since he discovered that first hybrid decades ago. Perhaps because I'm a bit old-fashioned. No, I think many agree on this issue. And because I'm attached to the idea of the wolf, as I've always known it, dreamed it, and experienced it. But I oppose the idea that tomorrow all Italian wolves will be naturally hybrids. Um,
Okay. How?
um, no, I think he's trying to imitate somebody. It's kind of funny. Um, okay, well, yeah, this is a big issue, but let's head over to see what's going on elsewhere in the world. So, from Sci News, researchers discover a new colony of Magellanic penguins. Oh, these little guys. So, Magellanic penguins are concentrated over in different regions off the coast of southern South America. So, different beaches of Chile, Argentina, as well as southern Brazil have these small penguins. The Magellanic penguins reach somewhere around, I think, 12 to 20 pounds and, or somewhere around 6 to 8 kilograms. Also feed on a wide variety of different species of krill, as well as small species. Well, also like Antarctic krill in the region, and different species of small fish in the region. So they are much smaller than the king penguins, the emperor penguins over in Antarctica. King penguins are a little further north of the continent, but they're still in the Antarctic Ocean.
Who are those little tiny penguins?
The little penguins over in Australia barely weigh a little more than 3 pounds. It's a large little penguin, or just over a kilogram. He seems proud. At least, let's hope that's what's going on. A team of scientists from the Wildlife Conservation Society, the CONICT, and Argentina's National Parks Administration has discovered a new colony of Magellanic penguins, Cepheniscus magellanicus, on a remote island in Argentina. Wow, well, that's good to hear. We found another population of Magellanic penguins. So this specific individual is on a bluff on Isla de los Estados, Argentina.
Maybe they were in witness protection.
Yeah, he definitely seems that way. The Magellanic penguin is a medium-sized species of penguin that is found in South America. The species breeds in coastal Patagonia, including Argentina and the Islas Malvinas, and in Brazil. It is named after Ferdinand Magellan, who saw the bird in 1519 on his first voyage around the tip of South America. Magellanic penguins are 71 to 61 to 76 centimeters, or 24 to 30 inches tall, and weigh 2.7 and 6.5 kilograms. Their black and white feathering is very dense, more than 50 or 70 feathers per square inch. I don't know how to convert that to centimeters at the moment. With a waterproof coating of oil that keeps them warm. There's also blubber too.
I don't know. If I roll in oil, I think I would get cold.
Um,
I definitely feel slimy.
well, it's also bird oil, so it's even different.
Ew.
But I think the bird oil would be better than the I'm not sure what kind of oil you're referring to. Never mind. This species is listed as near threatened on IUCN's red list, and the global population is estimated to be between 1.1 and 1.6 million pairs, is decreasing. Well, it's good to see that they're at that population at least. It's not like what's going on with South African penguins. They're having a real tough time. Luckily, there has been more effort into creating chicks, or hatching more chicks of the South African penguins, but they're being hunted fiercely by caracals and South African otters over on the coast of the country. The main threats to the species, yeah, it's like every sea creature. So our team was incredibly excited to discover the new colony, said Dr. Andrea Raya Ray, WCS associate researcher and staff at Cadit Connecticut. The more colonies we know exist, the more we can advocate for their protection. Um, I would think the less that there are, the more extreme it seems. But I guess in this instance, it seems more appealing. The new colony was found on the eastern side of Isla de los Estados. I was wondering about that. At the southernmost end of the South American continent. Of course, it's at the tip of Argentina. We made the discovery while surveying a known colony of rockhopper penguins. So this is another species in the region. There's also the South American penguins in the area, which we had been tracking by remote cameras for 2 years. Dr. Ray and colleagues explained. Yeah, there's around, believe 18 different species of penguin on Earth. So when we eventually assessed an unexplored area of the rockhopper colony, we discovered the telltale nesting burrows of Magellanic penguins hidden in tall grasses. Yeah, it is interesting when you have it where the penguins over in Antarctica, which most people are more familiar with, um, they're not really coming into contact with plants and they don't create a nest because they're having to incubate the egg on their own. Whereas here, they can take advantage of soil and as well as plants. I mean, themselves too. The exact number of Magellanic penguins remains unknown, but the perimeter of the new colony was defined. A census was conducted to estimate population size, and some blood samples have been taken from individuals to determine their health and diet. The discovery adds to the growing list of 50 plus known colonies of Magellanic penguins. I didn't know that there were that many of this species. The largest colony is in the Punta Tombo Provincial Reserve, a protected area created in Argentina with the help of WCS more than 50 years ago. Well, it seems to be that they're okay. I wonder why they are supposedly decreasing. That's odd. Now, there is the issue right now where, I mean, it's not exactly a terrible thing, but it's just predation where the cougars in the region or the pumas are taking advantage of, I believe, Magellanic penguins off different coasts of Argentina. So, I mean, the cat just found a.
Fried or roasted?
Um, I think they actually prefer in stew, but fry works as well. I'm not sure about roasted. So let's head over to another part of the world. So from news dot basically University of Nebraska Lincoln, um, or Nebraska Today, scientists study movement of elk in agricultural landscapes. Wonder where it's taking place specifically. Well, this is a good picture. It's a very healthy bull.
Is that a calf?
Yeah. There's also another calf on the other side. These might be their mothers. So it's probably taking place somewhere around late September or early October during the rut. Elk returned to Nebraska in the 1960s after being eliminated from much of the northern Great Plains in the late 1800s. Since then, elk numbers have expanded and they now occupy much of western Nebraska. Are we sure? There's not that many elk in Nebraska. Unless it's really including like the Nebraska National Forest area, which still isn't very large, and some of the only trees in the state. A team of researchers from the University of Nebraska Lincoln and the Nebraska Game and Parks Commission began a comprehensive study of elk behavior and population dynamics in 2022. They recently published the first findings from their research in the journal Biological Conservation. I think when it comes to elk in general, there's somewhere around 3,000 over in Nebraska, constituted over 7 different herds. But I don't believe, I mean, yeah, Nebraska, also compared to Texas, isn't as or that big of a state, but I don't believe they cover the whole western area of the region. So elk have been studied extensively in mountainous and coastal populations across North America, but fewer studies have occurred in prairie agricultural landscapes such as Nebraska. Yeah, Nebraska is one of the farming states of the Midwest. I mean, I guess you could say the whole Midwest is known for farming. Maybe North Dakota a little less so, but um, it is a mix. It's one of those states where it's a mix of prairie and agriculture. But even Iowa, Kansas, Oklahoma, except Oklahoma, it's a bit confusing where it's placed. It's like somewhere between the South and the Midwest. and then a little bit of eastern Colorado. Let's see. So, elk are highly valued by hunters, but can also cause damage to crops. There was a need for reliable data about areas occupied by elk and their movements throughout Nebraska to inform wildlife managers tasked with responding to public interest and concern. Tabitha Hughes, a doctoral student at Nebraska and lead author of the new study, has spent the last 3 years working on these knowledge gaps. Not much is known about elk in Nebraska, which was a big motivation for our study. I actually find that a bit surprising. I guess you could say Nebraska is one of those states, and especially over in like the southern Midwest, it's a bit ignored when it comes to wildlife research or just wildlife behavior in general. When it comes to animals like black bears that roam through occasionally, the elk, the rare moose that might pop up, but I don't recall any moose, at least the past couple of years, that have made it to the not in Alaska, Nebraska border. Coming in from areas of like Wyoming, or one making a long trip from North Dakota through South Dakota and just to check Nebraska out, and then it just leaves. Um, let's see. So, the better we understand these animals, the better equipped the wildlife biologists will be to manage elk populations for the public to enjoy while also mitigating crop depredation. Um, Managing, I guess, mean by managing is spreading them out in different areas. I was just thinking of simply calling them or taking them out. The team used helicopters to locate more than 200 female and male elk across Nebraska and outfit them with GPS tracking collars. Wow, that was quick. They immediately got out there and just collared
A
these,
lot of tracking collars.
yeah, collared these individuals. I haven't seen this in many instances. Usually, either they don't collar many individuals, or it takes a while to do this. And this seems immediate.
Wouldn't it be cheaper these days just to put a drone above them and let them follow them?
Um, well, yeah, but um, problem is it might freak them out. And if it's during the rut, then the drones might get taken out by the elk, specifically the bulls. The collars collect highly accurate locations of the animals and relay them to the researchers via satellites. Studying elk in Nebraska took the team to some expected natural landscapes, but also to places most people might not expect to find elk. Yeah, there's that instance that happened, I think maybe last year, where there was an elk in the middle of a cornfield, and I think it was an authentic video. Like, I don't think it was AI. And you just had it where the guy was, or the farmer was, harvesting his corn. And luckily, the elk got up and out of the last strands of corn, before he became, a,
Hamburger?
I was going to say like,
Elk jerky?
yeah, I was just thinking of some elk, I don't know, roasted elk or something. Anyway, yeah, elk burgers, elk steak, elk ribs. See, so we captured elk in many wild places, including the forested canyons of the Pine Ridge and the wide open spaces of the Sand Hills. Pine Ridge is also in western Nebraska, but the Sand Hills is adjacent to where the Nebraska National Forest is, and basically adjacent to the Sand Hills of South Dakota. This is also not too far from late Cretaceous layers where we can find different species of dinosaurs like Triceratops and Montosaurus T Rex in the area. So said John Benson, associate professor in the School of Natural Resources and one of the project leaders. When it comes to wolves heading into Nebraska, I think they have occurred in the region. Definitely cougars have been showing up, somewhere between 100 and 150 cougars over in Nebraska, which is a very small population. But wolves occasionally make their way over, but then they head back to Wyoming or Colorado.
And for anybody wondering, he's not dead.
Oh, yeah, this is a tranquilized individual. So we also caught a few elk in areas with vast stretches of crop fields in every direction and very little natural habitat. Studying elk in the highly variable landscapes across Nebraska highlights just how adaptable these animals are. It's interesting though. There's something about this elk. He seems small. Like when you look at his antlers, almost as if he's not getting enough nutrition. Maybe he's just a younger bull, which is possible, but he has those are small.
Are you referencing the antlers?
Yeah.
Okay.
Um yeah, it's just weird. Maybe there's something genetically about the elk in Nebraska and they're smaller than ones over in different parts of Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, Alberta. So let's see what's going on. So elk and other wildlife establish home ranges or areas where animals pursue activities such as feeding, mating, or raising their young. Wait a second. So it says Jake Harvey, Tabitha Hughes, and John Benson tag an elk during elk captures in February. And I think this was like this year. Maybe it's something about the winter, and that's why he seems a bit small. He just lost a bunch of weight. That could be the possibility. Still, those tiny antlers. So, the new study found that elk use seasonal home ranges average about 25 square miles. Was that pushing around 45 to 48 square kilometers? Ranging from 1 to as many as 225 square miles. Whoa! That's like pushing somewhere around 400 to 420 square kilometers. That is huge. Yeah, they are having a lot of trouble in some instances getting enough to eat. When you have an animal that has that large of a home range, it is tough for them getting nutrition. The 25 square miles is still not small, even for an elk. Yes, these animals aren't um, migratory creatures, not to the same extent as like reindeer or caribou over in different parts of Canada, Alaska, or even moose over in different parts of Sweden, but, they do still make longer treks than a lot of large terrestrial mammals of today in the northern hemisphere. We're just leaving the wildebeest and the elephants out, zebras too. Zebras technically make the longest migration of any large mammal in, on Earth,
Wait a minute, they
on
move
land.
further than the,
The reindeer or caribou?
no, no,
Yes.
no. I was
Wildebeest?
yeah.
Slightly longer over in Botswana. The wildebeest technically make the, second longest trek over in Tanzania and Kenya. Unless I'm mistaken, and we have to include those wildebeest that accompany the zebras over in Botswana. And then they get the crown for wildebeest. So, elk home ranges were smaller in areas with more tree cover and cornfields that provide food and shelter. That makes sense. Now, the question is where are they getting the calcium, phosphorus, the sodium for growing their antlers? Maybe there's certain crop fields that they're obtaining those nutrients from because though Western Nebraska is a lot more, you could say, native plants or just really undisturbed prairie in different regions compared to like central and eastern Nebraska. That's pretty much all crop field. So that's my guess. Conversely, elk home ranges were larger in areas with more roads, likely due to fragmentation that causes elk to travel farther between patches of suitable habitat. Yeah, probably. I mean, they're probably also living or sheltering, not including the crop fields at certain times, and also during the winter. You have it where the fields are pretty much barren, so there isn't really any shelter for them, and they need to find those fragments of prairie in different areas. The issue with that is now, I guess it's fine at the moment, considering there aren't that many elk, and so there isn't really a worry for diseases occurring, just with too many in a certain region. The team also used the data to identify elk that migrate between areas on the landscape in different seasons and understand why they might do so. Prior to the current research, it was unknown whether elk in Nebraska migrated and where they spent different seasons. Hmm. Okay, that is a those are important questions. Interesting. Elk I actually thought they would know that, but maybe there just hasn't been enough time. Elk in Nebraska are what ecologists call partially migratory. That is how elk are viewed in North America. This means that some animals in a population migrate between spatially distinct areas used in different seasons, while others remain residents in more or less the same areas throughout the year. Usually, this reflects ecological flexibility as different animals in the population adopt different strategies to assess resources or respond to risks that vary across seasons. This might be a bit confusing. um, it's referring to different herds of a certain population, like within the state, not necessarily um, like certain individuals within a herd, and then they're foraging far off in a different area. The herd tends to stay in close proximity of each other. Now, there's also the bachelor herds of males, which outside of the rut tend to stay away from the females. The same goes for moose, mule deer, white-tailed deer, most deer species, including, well, it's a bit different with reindeer or caribou. They tend to somewhat stay amongst each other, which is interesting. Agriculture appears to play a major role in migration and other seasonal movements. The new research showed that elk moved greater distances between seasons when leaving areas with less natural vegetation to assess areas with more cropland. I mean, um that seems about right, considering they're going to quickly strip the vegetation in those different areas, at least if it's a vegetation that they prefer. Considering elk tend to be more of grazers or grass eaters, also a bit of shrub eaters compared to different species of deer like moose, white-tailed deer. Mule deer are somewhat more grass eaters in North America, but elk are more so. So this makes sense. These results suggest that when elk are unable to find adequate natural forage, they are more likely to relocate to croplands with agricultural food. Um, yeah, I mean that definitely seems to be the case. Mule deer are not as known for raiding crop fields. It's probably because when it comes to their overall range, they don't really come into contact with crop fields or for the most part. But it's just odd that, unlike pretty much most other deer, but you could say moose to an extent, moose just might steal freshly baked cookies off of your patio, um, or like maybe certain pumpkins or fruits. But outside of that, they're oh, okay, never mind. If you grow pumpkins further north, then moose are probably raiding your fields. Okay,
So
okay.
like black bears.
To an extent, I think black bears prefer them already picked for some reason. Now, if you have where black bears aren't living adjacent to certain neighborhoods, then I would also assume they're raiding the pumpkin fields too.
I meant when you leave cookies up on your porch.
Oh, yes. Hopefully, they don't have chocolate. Chocolate's, I mean, it's bad for everybody, but I also wonder if they can specifically smell it. Well, I assume they can because the cookies that I have heard or seen moose steal, they don't have any chocolate. It's usually like some oatmeal dish. So let's see. So in mountainous landscapes, agriculture appears to reduce the prevalence of migration, as many elk will choose to stay near cropland all year when they would otherwise move to higher elevations in the summer. I wonder how much of a difference it is in elevation when it comes to western Nebraska. It is slightly hilly. I wouldn't call it mountainous to an extent, or um, mainly because just how it's dwarfed by the corresponding Black Hills or the small patch of Rocky Mountains over in western South Dakota. It's not too far north though. But yeah, this seems about right. If you have availability to a wide variety of nutrients in a specific area, but they're still having to roam quite far. Still though, why would you in this case with the elk move? But here in Nebraska, we've seen the opposite as cropland seems to encourage some elk to move from natural areas into agricultural fields during the summer and fall, and they will sometimes move quite far to do so. Some Nebraska elk migrated short distances, 5 to 10 miles. Well, that's definitely shorter than what we saw earlier. With the well, it wasn't really talking about migration, just the overall range. Like the small area is 25 square miles, and then pushing as many as 225 square miles or over 400 square kilometers, while others migrated more than 25 miles between seasonal ranges. It's quite far. This is what can occur in certain areas of Colorado or Wyoming, including one that went more than 50 miles. that a bull? Sounds like a bull that did that. All the elk radio collared for the study were captured in Nebraska, but they did not always stay in the Cornhusker state. Didn't actually know that was a term for Nebraska. Some ventured into parts of South Dakota, Wyoming, Colorado, and Kansas. I mean, that makes sense if they're concentrated, depending on where this elk was, over in the or along the western border of Nebraska. It's adjacent to all of those different states. It is interesting though. Make it down to Kansas. You just wanted to hang out in the prairie more, but you could say that for pretty much everybody or all of the states here, except for possibly certain parts of very eastern Wyoming, basically adjacent to the Black Hills or the just western lowlands of the Black Hills over in adjacent South Dakota. So the elk movements recorded with the GPS collars have opened our eyes to how much our elk really move. Yeah, it's interesting because you would expect for Nebraska, I guess in many people's eyes, to not be much movement. But no, in these case or this case, the elk are constantly on the move. Let's see, said Luke Meduna, a big game program manager with Nebraska Game and Parks and one of the project leaders. These scholars have helped us realize that what we once thought were distinct bands of elk in separate areas are the same elk using those areas at different times. Yeah, it is quite fascinating. Data from Nebraska elk continue to roll in and provide a window into their world. Next up for Hughes and the team is to tackle questions about elk behavior at finer scales. Specifically, how do elk acquire food and other resources while navigating risk from hunters and natural predators? I think the only ones, well, you could have where cougars are occasionally hunting the elk in this area. Coyotes might be taking out the fawns, or I guess you could say calves at first, but they're not going to take on a full grown elk, not even a female. Anybody else? The occasional black bear that might hit the area, but black bears are not common in Nebraska. I'd say they're quite rare. You will hear of them occasionally over in the eastern part of the states, but even then, I'd say sightings over in adjacent northern Missouri and southern Iowa might be a bit more common, but even there, they're quite scarce. So the team will also estimate survival rates and identify causes of mortality. The work promises to provide wildlife managers in Nebraska with a more complete understanding of this wide-ranging species that appears to be continuing to expand its range eastward in the state. That's really good to see. I am surprised a bit that they didn't still mention the population, but seems to be somewhere around 3,000. So thanks for joining. And we're streaming on both Rumble, YouTube, and Kick. And from Prehistoric to Presence, my name is Ethan. This is Creature Guy Live Daily News. Happy International Penguin Day. And remember that nothing's better than